from your traditional background.
Yeah. So I feel like me getting into Web3 was a little bit of a hack. I don't know how it happened, and I'm incredibly lucky. But essentially, like I think most people, when you talk to them who work in Web3, did come in around 2017, 2016 during the first bull market when Bitcoin got big. I did not get into Web3 at that time. However, my sister did. And so she's kind of been my in the sense that that's how I heard about it. That's how I've kind of like stayed in touch with um I guess the space, like not super deep into it. And then it kind of came around, what was it like? It was end of last year, 2021. And I was like, 2022, new me, I'm gonna change my job. What do I do? Right. And that obviously crypto was getting really big. DeFi was always really interesting to me. However, like once NFTs kind of like NFT summer came around, that's when I realized like, wow, this is actually going to really unlock Web3 for the entire world, right? Like very practical use cases outside of just like financial stuff is like what made me realize, there's a lot of potential here in Web3. That coupled with just like my sister actually started working in Web3 as well in 2021. She's a dev advocate at 0x Labs actually. So I basically just copied her. But like through her, I got to experience like people who were working in the space, realizing like everyone is a builder, no one knows what they're doing. And that was that was the environment I wanted to be in, right? Where every day is something innovative, every day is like you learning, and like coming in not knowing anything is expected, and is just like a natural part of your job. And that's kind of how I hopped on. Like I heard about it, I knew I wanted to join. I just applied to Consensys and
Yeah.
they like accepted me. I really don't know, because I guess you could say I got interested in Web3 at the start of this year, which is when I kind of applied. Um, and I wrote a cover letter about the reasons I was interested in. And like I had mentioned before, I think because everything is so new, that barrier to entry of like being worried that, I don't really have any experience is not, shouldn't be a worry. And I feel like I'm living proof of that. Or maybe I'm an edge case. I don't think I am, but I don't know. What about you,
Yeah, no,
Scott?
no, you came in, I think, a better environment than when I did. I started in like late 2016, 2017, where it was the hype of the ICO phase. And that obviously had a lot of negative connotations that derived from it, which really sailed this notion of blockchain being more or less of a scam. So when I started doing it and getting into it, and actually, fun fact, a buddy of mine, when we started to go down this venture, he's actually Wes, he's the head of Truffle.
Oh
We
yeah.
explored this world together. And he can vouch for this. It very much was a concept where it's like, okay, this whole attachment to crypto and independent coin offerings and it being kind of very volatile and scamish, like this isn't a good thing for you, Mr. Scott, to go pursue. And I had to kind of get over that because I fell in love with the technology, more so than the crypto side. As much as I think it's fun to talk about cryptonomics and things of that nature, I think more or less around just what the technology is capable of doing in a decentralized manner made sense to me. And it really became clear once you started seeing more of the practical use cases come to life. So that's when it got exciting for me, is when I actually started seeing like actual applications that were relevant on the blockchain. For a while, everything was just built on blockchain. And you started to see like not everything needed to be decentralized. Like there is a part where centralization is okay. But nonetheless, I think that's when I really realized, okay, this is what I want to do. So I kind of pursued it from the entrepreneurial element, kind of left this kind of corporate background, being in Microsoft, et cetera, and going towards something that was new and kind of exciting, and looking at it from like the new internet, if you will, was really what made it enticing. And now Consensys was exciting because it allowed us to really see all the great tools that made this a reality. And one of the biggest things that kind of made sense to me is when it comes to like being educated. I initially kind of gravitated towards like, okay, where do I start learning and upskilling and continue to maintain my knowledge around this? And there wasn't much out there at the time. And it wasn't until like YouTube podcasts became a little bit more prevalent in this space, and people got more comfortable talking about it because the whole notion of it being a scam started to subside because you realize it's here to stay. Blockchain isn't going anywhere, right? So that's for me. It
I hope
wasn't
so.
really
Yeah.
transition. Yeah, people get scared. Like, tell me about like the misconceptions that we would offer, because we've heard it. But what would you say to somebody that's a bit like hesitant? Because I heard this now. We're in the bear market. This is what the conversation's about, and the connotations around, well, crypto's down, stock is down. On a macroeconomical standpoint, everything's a bit chaotic and flux. Like, I like blockchain and the idea, but I don't know if I want to pursue it because it's unstable. What would you say to that?
I mean, it's really hard to say because like one of the reasons I pursued Web3 was a little bit of that instability. But I think we are at a point where like ETH is like too big to fail. I don't want to say that necessarily, but like you said, there have been applications that are out there that have proven a use case, like seeing decentralization as a tool to improve certain like make friction experiences frictionless is out there. I am not necessarily of the opinion that Web3 will replace Web2, right? But more so that decentralization is going to be a natural part of our life. And so when you think about like if you have that core belief that it's not going to go away, I think the second piece is like hearing that the bear market is happening is actually really exciting, right? So bear market means like things are slowing down. I think what that also means, it's a little bad to say this, maybe like bad projects will die essentially, right? So like when there's like the ICO craze or things are growing, I feel like during this last bull run, everything was like, hey, let's decentralize this. Like, let's say this, but on blockchain. And it's like, that's great. I'm glad you're tinkering around with it. But it almost feels like, I mean, like when people say it's a scam, it's like because of this like craze where people are just adding in like VC storing money that, you know, blockchain starts to get its bad rep again. And with the bear, you're joining companies that are working to survive. If you are like work like so for example like the base layer of like blockchain development. If you're not familiar with what we do, one of our offerings is just basically a full suite of developer tooling. So for me personally, when I was going into like blockchain Web3, like the instability was something I looked for more so because it identified a certain type of person that I wanted to work with in the sense like risk taking, ambitious, like innovative. But I am still a little risk tolerant. Like I am an S&P like 500 index fund kind of girl. And so with like pursuing where like what sector of Web3 I wanted to get into, I knew dev tooling was kind of the path forward, right? Because no matter what, I believe, you know, blockchain is here to stay. We're just looking for dApps, applications, product market fit. No matter what, you're going to need dev tools to build that, right? So when you think like Gold Rush, I guess it's like Consensys is like the Levi Strauss, right? Like
Oh gosh.
we're the gene company. And I don't know, that's something to think about, right? Just like I've gone off tangent to circle back to like what bear market means is because we're building slower, we can build better. And the companies that are around and stay are the ones who've demonstrated that they're essentially not the scam that is scaring people away from Web3.
Right. Yeah, and the tools are such an essential component to the success of and the betterment of actually having this work. I mean, with bad tooling, which we've seen out there, it does exist. It kind of detracts developers and people that want to utilize it. And so I think it's incumbent on a company like Consensys to not only provide good tools, but also the next kind of phase that I see that I think is important and relevant to this conversation is, as with the audience listening, is a lot of people that are interested in now like joining in the space like as a career. And you kind of mentioned like tooling is where it's at. Like there's different areas where you can kind of get into in blockchain and work, and we're all for that. But I agree with you. I think at that layer, that becomes the pivotal, like essential component of making this a reality, making blockchain adoption available and capable on a global sector. What, as far as education goes, like what would you advise people that are, whether they're technical or not technical, what would be a good like kind of a pathway for them, if you will, to kind of get into? Because there's lots of
Yeah.
avenues.
Yeah, this is a really good question that I always feel a little embarrassed to answer because people ask me, right? Because like I work in Web3, I'm a developer advocate. My job is to like to essentially teach people Web3. They're like, Emily, how did you learn about all of this? And my first answer was like, okay, well, actually, I got really lucky because I live with someone who works in Web3. And then I joined a company with like very little experience where everyone is so open about sharing their knowledge that I was really able to just like ask questions. Like and get them answered right away. I think the prerequisite to that I would recommend for people who don't have that opportunity is like knowing what the right questions to ask are. Um, is an interesting problem that I had through just like basically Googling online, like, what is blockchain? Like starting from the very basics. You have, I think, a variety of different types of educational resources. So if your learning style is you want to be in more of a guided classroom environment, we do have Consensys Academy. That Are you working on Consensys Academy? Actually, I'm not.
Yep, I'm a part of that. Yeah.
Right. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about that. But like, those kind of more guided experiences. The way I learn personally is I'm just on Twitter all the time. And crypto Twitter is really big. So that just ends up being like, hey, this person tweeted this and I don't know what this word means. Let me like Google it. And then you just like get down this like random rabbit hole. Right. And just like I think that's what's really cool about the bear market right now too, is because things are slowing down, a lot of new educational material is coming out, right? So I like, as you had touched on, Scott, like when you first started there wasn't that much out there, right? But I'm lucky, there's just like a treasure trove. It's like, how do you figure out what to do? Like, where do you choose? And I think a lot of times what you're looking for in education as well is like kind of where you want to sit in Web3 in terms of either like as an investor or a hobbyist. There's that frame of stuff. We're talking about jobs here specifically.
Right.
So there's stuff like if you're not planning on being like a dev, for example, I mean, you can touch on this, right? Consensys Academy has more of like a general overview thing. I just Googled like ethereum.org has a lot of resources as well, just for covering the basics. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to, getting a job, I would say in terms of education, like for us, right, we were focusing on developer tooling. So that means we need to be very technically focused. That's starting to look at more of the technical educational resources out there. So, I mean, again, I'm saying Consensys Academy has it. I know like Alchemy has the Road to Web3, and like Nader Dabit and Patrick Collins have put out like really robust courses.
Shout out to Patrick Collins. Very good episodes he puts out.
Yeah, he put great content. And then like in NFTs, DAOs, whatever. I think that's kind of where you start to dive in deeper. Because there's so much to cover in Web3. Things are happening every day. You just kind of have to choose your niche. And like, I guess I chose a very kind of top overview thing where I need to know a little bit of everything, but not necessarily be an expert in everything. But I'd imagine, for example, if you wanted to work in like DAO tooling, right, that requires some subject matter expertise in that. I don't want to say expertise because it is still very beginner focused.
Right.
And just like Googling like DAO, whatever. I don't know.
No,
I mean,
no
like, what
shame in
about you,
Google.
Scott?
No
Like,
shame.
you said you started
Yeah,
with.
I think the community is one of the things that's nice about the emerging technology of blockchain is the community behind it is so embracing. I actually learned quite a bit at conferences in the early days. Going
Yeah.
at the events, and there was actually a local meetups out here. I'm from the Seattle, Washington area, and it was great because you can come in, whether you've been experienced or not, everyone treats each other as if we don't know anything. And the reality is we kind of don't. because we're all building this wheel that hasn't even been invented, and we're doing this together in a decentralized manner. So the way we communicate and educate each other, it allows for people that might be a bit timid to feel a little bit more accepted and confident to ask these simple questions. And I think that often is a scary thing, especially in technology, because it could be a bit intimidating. It's a very nuanced technology. If you get to the granularity of the protocol layer, right? We both know this, but at the surface, like it's capable of explanation, and there's no like limit on the amount of like basic level questions that you're able to ask. I'd still find myself asking very fundamental questions that I think I know the answer, but I need to get reminded. And so I think the community
Yeah.
is certainly absolutely it's such a help. And Twitter, yeah, crypto Twitter has been great because you can literally post or retweet and with a question mark, and then you get like 10 or 12 comments that help kind of solidify and clarify what you're trying to like get accomplished here. And so that was one good one. Yeah, Consensys, they do have a boot camp that they do every year, which is also really good. This is a bit more hands-on. So if you are technical or you wanted to go down that track as a dev, this is where you can build out basically a decentralized application. You can deploy your first smart contract on mainnet, understanding intricacies of what goes into building a smart contract. So you would use Truffle and MetaMask, etc. And then the cool thing is at the end, you'd be able to kind of showcase your DApp to the community. So you would have that's my favorite part, is that kind of demo day where they got to show off some of these great ideas. And I have seen some that had such a great idea that they've actually started and turned themselves into a mini startup, and they gotten seed funding and whatnot. And I love that, because that's the power of this technology. Is you build something with a practical use case, you're going to get vested in some way or form because there's a need for it. You just identified that. And it's amazing and cool when you see the identification happen in the education system through via boot camps. So there's that. And then I think, yeah, with like YouTube, there's a lot of great, streaming series out there. Even our good friend Kevin Weaver has a podcast. I'll listen to his stuff at Dapp University. There's some great resources that you can just get your daily digest, if you will, to kind of keep what's happening. And this is helpful too. So part of what Consensys Academy also offers is a bit of a for non-technical. So it's called Blockchain Essentials. That's another good one. So if you're like me, who I'm technical but not technical where I would code, I can speak to it. This is for people that because every company doesn't just need devs. We need salespeople, we need product managers, PMs, we need biz analysts, data analysts, etc. And so that all doesn't necessarily mean you need to understand like Solidity and kind of that kind of fundamental layer. So there's definitely a need for that. So that course kind of really gets you more into the business side of what blockchain is and the fundamentals behind that. And I found it very educating. But there's so much more out there. I think the one thing that I try to I'm trying to be a little bit more keen on as we kind of evolved since my time in 2016 and even your time when you got in 2020. The question is, and I get this too, is how to identify what is like outdated, because the last thing you want to do is be educated, and the worst thing is to pay for some kind of boot camp and only to find out everything you learned is like outdated. What would be some like tips and tricks to like, or key kind of indicators that you would look out for?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, first off, you could probably find like the time it was created on the material, right? But I mean, I think it's a lot about like thinking, what are you necessarily trying to learn, right? So a piece on like what an NFT is or what a blockchain is never going to change, right? So that's always going to be in what do you call it? In style or correct to an extent, right? I think what it is like how has it developed might not necessarily be a part of every boot camp. So in terms of like tips and tricks for like figuring that out, I mean, like I think that's just like to get the most up-to-date content, you have to follow and find channels that are consistently producing new content, right? And so that was definitely a gap I had identified. And something that I felt acutely as well, especially being a developer, just like tech changes so quickly, whether or not you're in Web3 or you're in Web2, like tools, technologies, best practices get outdated, right? Or like new technologies are coming in. You're like, what is this? How does it work? So if you guys don't already know this, like part of what I've been doing at Truffle is I started this series called Web3 Unleashed. Um, it's a live stream series that I am attempting to do every week, which I have sort of accomplished. We'll see how my mental health keeps up with this cadence. So it might reduce down to every other week. But I started this for like two purposes, right? So I think the first part, we talked a lot about just like how to get educated. And there's so many resources out there, but ultimately it's just do it kind of thing. Like you just have to try and learn. And my opinion is like the best way to learn is to also be able to teach it, right? Because then that's how you know the material. So Web3 Unleashed became an opportunity for me to say, like, I actually really don't know about what this is, but I'm gonna give myself a week to learn everything I can about it and then present it to like however hundred whatever many people are gonna like trust my opinion or like my knowledge. And like that was one of the things. I think the second part of it was like working at Consensys, we have like this great treasure trove of connections, networks, people who've been in the business. So taking that as an opportunity to say, hey, I can bring on these industry experts to come and talk about what they're building currently, was something I wanted to achieve with Web3 Unleashed. And then what I don't remember what I was saying with this, but yeah, and like it's just a cadence of like whatever I'm interested in, and then that's just what I'm gonna build for that week. And I get a lot of that again, like I said, from crypto Twitter. Also just keeping a pulse on communities, which I'm really glad you called out. I'm sure, like, obviously, if you're here because of Crypto Chicks, you are involved in a Web3 community. Someone's going to chatter about something. You might see like a tweet or a repost or something. And obviously, because that's real time, that is going to be something very recent. And then that's something like if it catches your eye or you don't know what it is, like that's when you hop on and say, like, I'm going to investigate this now. And that's kind of like how I've kept up with developments in the space. But I don't know if you have like tips either. It's a tough problem for
Yeah.
sure.
The date of the release is also a pretty good indicator, right?
Yeah.
I've also seen some boot camps where I will look and I'll see like all the certification happened in 2018. So I'm like, it's probably not a boot camp worth pursuing. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just like real time, like being involved in like, there's a lot of like communities in terms of like groups or what meetups, if you will, a lot of virtual ones, which makes it really nice. And a lot of the groups actually stem out of these like virtual conferences because you start to meet people and you network and you get to learn like, oh, there's a lot of people just like me. And then you find out what they're doing. So the best part is use your community as advocates and as advisors to guide you to understand and to be educated, because there's nothing better than having somebody go down the path before you and can kind of help hold your hand a bit. I appreciate that. I try to do the same with people that get in the space because they're kind of excited naturally because once they get past the hurdles of like the misconceptions, they're like, all right, this is a real deal. This is not a scam. How do I learn? Where do I go and learn? Now I want to work in it. And so yeah, I think just using the community to the extent, and DAOs are also a wonderful resource to get into. DAOs are great. Just because of the nature of how they're formed and how they're all driven by the community. And it's also a great opportunity to start contributing. So when we talk about like, how do I get noticed or when we move into the direction of like portfolio enhancement and getting a job in the space, I think one key factor is I know at Consensys, we love to see people that have been involved in the ecosystem, regardless if you're paid for it or not. Is you're just showing an initiative that this is like, more importantly, you're doing it on your own time is even cooler, in my opinion. But yeah, that's really kind of, there's always going to be outdated stuff out there. So I would always say, do your due diligence. One day we'll see the universities and at the collegiate level start to like adopt blockchain into the programs and the comp sci degrees. I know some schools are getting close to there. We used to be good, or we still are, good partners with what is it called? Blockchain at Berkeley. They're a great example, right? They have a big community and they do wonderful things and train and teach people. And a lot of the instructors are doing it pro bono. So it's a great thing that they do. When it comes to like really getting this, you get the education piece, but now it's like you want to start to like apply it, and ultimately you want to get a job. So the first question I want to hear from you, your answer is, I get this all the time, is do I need blockchain experience to come work in blockchain and or work at your company at Consensys? Here
Yeah,
all.
yeah. So I mean, I feel like the answer can be like yes and no, right? So in the sense that like obviously you can't come into Consensys and be like the head of product and know nothing about
Yeah, yeah.
blockchain if that's your goal, right? But I think when I was joining as I said, like I think I am living proof that you don't need that much experience. You just kind of need a passion and almost like a base understanding, right? So um how I prepared myself for the interview, as well as kind of like compiled my application for it, was basically like number one, I think like I said, I wrote a cover letter. I do think they are very valuable in the sense that if you feel like you're coming in without the experience, but you know that like you have the ability to do it, oftentimes a resume is not going to be able to reflect that, but you can really strongly communicate that through words. And so I can say at least at Consensys, they read my cover letter. So if that's something you want to pursue, like apply here. But the way I kind of structured it was like I started off with like why I was interested in blockchain, like my motivations for it, and then plugged in like how my experiences would translate into it, right? So like I had never done DevRel for like a blockchain company. I mean, like I actually had just never done DevRel before, but I had specific instances and projects that I had accomplished like as a Web 2 background. For me is I was a DevOps engineer that I think translated well, and then coupled with my passion for blockchain like made me want to get and like dive into like just working in Web3 right away, right? I don't remember what other question there was. Yeah, but like you said, like if you are doing stuff on your own time, like that's really awesome. I think just knowing how you want to get involved if you've already had some experience is a really great way to communicate your value and your ability to contribute. The joke, it's not a joke because it is a true story. Like when I interviewed for Truffle, and I've said this a few times, like I feel like I got in because of like this combination of passion for like fried chicken and NFTs. Like
Please do
so
tell me more.
yeah. So I mean, like basically how it went was like I when I was interviewing, I think you will probably encounter this for any interview you have at a Web3 company. I mean, it's probably standard for just any companies like why do you want to work here? Like what got you interested in Web3? And so like I told the whole spiel that I had said before, right? Of like, I was introduced to my sister. It's kind of always been in the back of my mind, but I saw like NFTs really unlock it for everybody. And like separate to that, something I am personally interested in at the time, like I've since pursued like more of the technical side, was like metaverse was like a really exciting concept to me. Just like I am very like alternate world kind of thing. I had this background actually. I did used to own a beverage company, right? So like trying to figure out how to fuse that idea of like CPG and Web3. This is when I say like we were in the age of scams.
Oh God.
Together where I was like, it would be really awesome if I could somehow figure out how to open up a fried chicken shop because I love fried chicken. It's one of my favorite foods in the metaverse. What that would look like NFTs as membership was a really big thing. Do we do a fried chicken like membership across like the metaverse that map to like real chicken shops?
Oh my God.
And like I don't know, half of my interview just became dedicated towards like building on this idea. And like even though I didn't have any practical experience, I think knowing how you wanted to get involved or like the reasons, like really strong conviction why was communicated through that. And like at least for Consensys wise, applying through like the thing that they took into consideration, right, is always like it's fine if you don't have experience, but can you learn? Can you adapt? Are you interested in like putting in the time and effort to actually get up to speed? Which I'm just gonna say is you will never get up to speed, so like that's why this is okay too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think just having a passion for it is good enough. Granted that you're coming into more of these like beginner, I don't want to say beginner roles, but like less like you're not making the head of product decisions.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and a
So
lot of these, and that's important because I mean, like the Crypto Hatchery, Consensys Academy, and these other great boot camps. Oftentimes, you come out of it, but you may not have like actual working experience. And so the idea of like, well, how do I even stand out and get exposed and get interviewed to these great companies that I have learned about? I learned their tooling in the boot camp, or I learned their tooling on these webinars. I want to start using it. When I don't have the actual practical experience, I have a DApp I may have built on a side project. And I think you've indicated it well, the passion of what you've done and the time you've devoted to invest your educational resources into that goes a long way. And I can't speak to other Web3 companies, although I would say Manny would probably hold hands with us on this idea that we embrace passion and we love that to the fullest extent. And that's oftentimes the driving factor of why we would hire someone like you that may not quote unquote have blockchain experience, because whether you use a fried chicken example, or for me, I would put the pho in the metaverse. That would be right. Talk about what kind of food you'd want in the metaverse. Metapho.
Yeah.
That would be a great way.
Metaphor.
I'm going to trademark that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that just really the passion kind of, and I know it sounds cliche, like be passionate about it. Of course I'm going to be, but like we really like identify that and we look out for it. Because if this isn't exciting for you, then and it's just another job, then then you can go work at a major corporate and make really good money and just be the one person that does the same job, every day, right? This paradigmatic kind of shift from Web 2 to Web 3 is a completely, inverted way on how we act as employees. I mean, Consensys, for example, we do a lot of things differently than corporate companies. We have a very autonomous environment in which we allow for innovation. And one other cool thing, I think you can speak this a bit more, Emily, we actually offer DAO days, which is a cool thing that a company basically enables you to go and contribute to other Web3 companies. What is your take on a company that allows for you to go and contribute towards other opportunities within Web3? Because that's a big statement right there.
Yeah. So that was, I think DAO days came after I had already started at Consensys, but one of the reasons I felt really comfortable going into the role here was talking to the Truffle team, realizing they are very interested in your learning. As I think we've just said so many times, the industry is constantly changing. So it is in the company's best interest for us to keep in tune with what other people are doing, right? There is a recognition. I always see Consensys a lot as kind of a thought leader and recognizing DAOs are the next evolution of companies, right? How do we get involved? How do we learn more about it? How do we build our company to address this new use case? Is we have our employees contribute to that, learn about it, just get their hands deep. And part of, I think, also just being able to contribute to, I guess, other companies or organizations is really I think a recognition that our employees are multifaceted. They have lives outside of work, and that was something I had really appreciated in my company beforehand. So leaving my Web 2 company was actually very difficult for me because I thought the work-life balance was really great, but separate to that, my team was, I would say, our number one quality that we valued was generosity with time, with learning, with advice. Separate to that, every other week at that company as well, we had dedicated learning time, which was just focused on, hey, employees, take off 4 hours every other week. Don't do company work, just learn whatever you want. Right. If you want, you can apply for funding to do so as well. And that was a really key part that was core to the culture of my previous company that I wanted in my next one. And so just like I said, again, the attitude of the Truffle team was really great. When I first started, I told my manager, I was I don't know anything. Can I just take maybe an hour or two every day, or maybe 1 day a week to just figure out what's happening? And the answer was yes. I was just that wasn't even Consensys organization sanctioned. It was just kind of at an individual level. And I think that really ties into the point that you're talking about autonomy here, where, employees, we hire you because we trust you to make the right decisions. Everyone that I've met here cares very intensely about our success. And so obviously with a 800, 900 organization of individually autonomous people, it gets messy, it gets hard, but I think as a result there's a lot of really good ideas, contributions, and excitement. I got off tangent again, off topic about DAO days specifically.
It's fine. you brought up the point that the main thing is you're continuing to better yourself and educate yourself. And it just goes to show that even us at Consensys, we want to and we need to continually to be educated, that we don't know. It's not like I mean, we're considered sometimes the subject matter experts, but to your point, Emily, there's really no expert really, because it's continuing to evolve. It's still so very new. And that's what makes it exciting. And I think that's also comforting from those who, whether they go to the Crypto Chicks Hatchery, Consensys Academy. I guess the final thing I want to kind of touch to is, how do you stand out as an applicant? And this would be a great time for those that are listening to take these tips to apply it, because in the bear market, like, this is a great time to really kind of beef up your portfolio. And not every company interviews and looks at resumes the same, but I can give my tips later. But I guess from your perspective, you did mention cover letter, which there was a while where people said cover letters need to die. But you've revived that, because I think your cover letter was a lot more, I guess.
I guess message me if you want my cover letter. Like, DM me on Twitter. I have given it to so many people.
There you go.
One part as a flex, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm so good at writing. But like other than that, like, yeah, cover letters definitely are very hard to write. I think there is an idea that like cover letters need to die, especially with like engineers, because people are like, oh, I wrote this code, like that should speak for itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of standing out, like I said, this is always just like I don't know if this is like one part imposter syndrome or just like shock. I don't know how I necessarily stood out, but I think like when I think about people who are applying now and like people who I want to work with, right? I think it is that piece of like, where have you, I guess, how have you demonstrated interest, right? And I'm tying it again back to just getting involved in communities. It feels like I think for me, being in Web3 makes it feel like it's already like blown up so much. Like, oh my God, there's so much competition in this space. How do I stand out amongst all these other people interested in Web3? But like, that is actually just like false, right? You step back and like, majority of the world is still not in Web3. I'm still of the opinion that we are at the place where if you have like demonstrated interest, can communicate that in some way, like that is like almost like good enough. Definitely, I think the practice that is both in Web 2 for job applications is like through referrals or job postings is still a thing, right? We at Consensys do your classic, like, what do you call it? If you recruit someone, you get incentive back. There's a word for it.
Referral bonus.
Yeah, referral bonus. Yeah, so that exists too. And I think like that is just another natural way to get kind of your application shot to the top. I know in a lot of DAOs that I'm involved in. So for example, like Developer DAO, which I'm part of, they have like a separate portion just for like job posting. So these are people directly working in Web3 seeking out roles, and like being part of this community gives you access to the people who are recommending these kinds of positions, right? So rather than sort of like a blind application, you have this like trove of direct communication. And so I guess like that's another way. It's like very traditional, guys. Like Web3 is not super revolutionary, that the way we apply to jobs has just completely changed. Though there are decentralized job postings now. So I mean, I guess if you want to like build your on-chain resume, there are like Web3 apps for I guess applying to jobs. So that's definitely a way to stand out, because that's just already, you're like full in, right? Like you put your resume in.
And it's nice within like DAO organizations where they can kind of like guide you into the because they're going to know what you've been contributing in, so they can kind of lead you to what makes sense for you in terms of like opportunities. And not everyone's looking for full-time roles. We're starting to see a shift of everyone's wanting to do more bounty-based work, which is interesting. We'll see what the next 5-10 years look like with the traditional W-2 employee. But nonetheless, I think as of right now, like when you learn this stuff, you're just passionate and you're excited and you're just eager to get into it. And some of the things that I've noticed that works really well is when you attend these like virtual conferences or even something like this, what's worked that I've seen it on the other end is if I speak, and somebody like messages me on LinkedIn and mentions what I talked about, or because it shows that they like listen to me, like I'm gonna respond to you. And I'm very gratitude. There's a lot of gratitude towards that, but it's not a pride thing at all. It's just like, wow, like thank you for taking the time to say that. And that's your opportunity to give your little shill of like, oh, I just finished this course, or you can, however angle you want to take, whether it's to look for employment or just to like better educate yourself. I always see that as very successful. And so and the beauty of having so many great virtual conferences and events and meetups now is you have that ability to like connect with influencers and folks that are in hiring authorities. So hiring managers often do a lot of conferences where they get asked to speak. And so LinkedIn still is, even though you might not think is traditional because Twitter is considered more of the crypto market.
Get a Telegram, guys. That's how you prove
Yeah,
that you're part of
there you go. Telegram.
Telegram.
It's funny. I even have told people when they've asked me and wanted to talk more, I'll give them then my Telegram. So we divert away from LinkedIn to that. But it just shows that you're doing your homework. You're kind of, it's just another angle because it can be quite competitive. There's lots of applications. We get tons at Consensys. I'm sure other big Web3 companies also get hundreds, if not thousands of applications. So as a candidate, you're like, how do I stand out amidst of these thousands of applications? And so, yes, it's knowing people certainly help, but attending these conferences or meetups are really good. And then if you're in the dev side, I think it is let your code do the talking. So like giving us your repo or GitHub on like a project or dApp that you built, and then letting us like see it will go a long way. And sometimes that actually speaks more than your resume itself, because we've seen that you played around with Truffle and you tested on Ganache and you used MetaMask and even Infera, if you will. Those are that we're obviously very excited because those are our tools and products. So we're going to definitely take notice of that. And then if you're going to go with a traditional resume, I think it's when you look at a job description, understand that there are like quote unquote requirements, but we try to stay away from that word. But if you see things in the resume, let the job description kind of tailor your resume a bit too. Because if you're reading things like, oh, I've done that, and you go and you look in your resume and it has nothing to do with it, it'd probably be advantageous to incorporate that. So that way we can connect the dots. Because we can't assume that like if you've done TypeScript or JavaScript, or if you've done even Truffle, but if it's not on your resume, it's going to be to your disadvantage. So use the job descriptions of the company you want to work for as a way to kind of frame your resume. And obviously, I'm not saying don't lie. Just make sure that if you see the job description say XYZ and you've done XYZ, make sure it's on your resume. It's super simple.
Yeah, for sure. But like to the point about just like letting your code first speak for itself. I know what's really popular in the Web3 space, for those of you who are developers, is like open source, I think is like already a big thing. It's even bigger with just like the concept of people who are passionate about decentralization. There are particular repos out there that are partnering with a company called Git POAP. So essentially, what it is if you make an open source contribution to a code, you will get a POAP. So that's like a proof of attendance protocol, but essentially it just like verifies that you contributed. And Truffle does like offer Git POAP. So if you're interested in working at Truffle or Consensys, or I guess it also just applies for everywhere, right? Yeah. Like consider contributing to our open source code. Just like a quick plug, like I'm building dApps, like trying to do it on like a weekly or bi-weekly cadence. There's a lot of ways I could see things being extended. So for example, this morning I built a rental marketplace app and like did a tutorial on it. One thing that I didn't add into it is a reservation system. So for like future reservation of an NFT rental, I didn't have time for that. But if you have time for that and you want to like add on like to that my code or whatever, maybe that'd be a great idea. Maybe a job referral would come through that. I don't know.
I don't know.
But I do like what you pointed out about just like virtual conferences, talking to people, meetups. Like that's a very just like standard kind of normal company thing to do, right? Just like go to meetups, meet people. I do want to plug like that sounds tiring, but the cool thing about Web3 being so new is, I don't know, just like the fresh injection of Web3 networking events are actually really fun.
Yes,
like,
they are.
They spend I don't know if they spend a lot of money, but they plan them well.
Yeah.
They're like all happy hours. Okay, they're not all happy hours, but they are very cool
They're all
happy hours.
happy. Maybe
They're
not
all
out.
happy. Like I went to
Yes.
one that was a circus. Like it's so weird when I tell people I network at like crypto raves, and it's just
Oh,
like there's such a variety of people in it, and there's such a lot of creativity that the way we've just like transformed the means of which we like traditionally network is just naturally fun, right?
yeah.
Like so I just go to one. Like they're cool. People are cool. I'm there, so I'm cool. Scott's there. He's cool.
That's right. That's right. We're a
Yeah.
family. We have a lot of fun together, and we're not afraid to admit what didn't work and our anomalies and our failures. And that's what's allowed us to see the evolution of the technology to grow is the vulnerability of like, okay, this didn't work. We're okay with admitting that. And this is how we resolved it. This is how we debugged it, whatever you want to use it, right? That's the idea. So no, I think this is great. And hopefully everyone got a chance to kind of get a good taste of not just Consensys, but Web3 isn't scary. It's exciting. Obviously, you're with Crypto Chicks, so you're certainly kind of passionate already, assuming. And obviously, if you want to plug Emily, your Twitter, so people can message you really quick.
Yeah. So I mean, just underscore EMJLIN.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
We're
that's
open to
me.
messages. Yeah. And I'm at
Yeah.
Scott Jane. And you can find me on LinkedIn too. I do want to leave it open. I know we only got like 9 minutes. Stacy, I don't know if there's questions that have been asked or not, but we're happy to do an AMA. If not, we can certainly wrap it up.
We've got a question from Tom. He says we are a Web2 health platform that recently added tokenomics and other Web3 functionality to our roadmap. And I'm wondering if we should expect our CTO to own it out, or do we need a dedicated resource?
A CTO to what it out?
A CTO to own it out, or do we need a dedicated resource?
Oh, okay. Oh God, I feel so unqualified to give like company advice. This is like beyond the scope of my.
So they're a Web2 company, a healthcare Web2 company that's slowly transitioning because I heard tokenomics or tokenization.
Right.
So does the CTO need to basically be educated and to start understanding this, or use an external resource that might already have? That's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't know.
I guess my personal take, this is by no means advice, this is my personal feeling, is when I am working under people, okay, not that I have, but I imagine like if I'm working under a person who is not knowledgeable enough about the space, I don't feel like it's necessarily like decisions being made are the best informed. So when I hear CTO, I definitely think of someone informing the technical decision making, even if he's not owning the entire like transition or process or whatever. Like I, as an employee coming in, so like if I was to be applying, for example, for the Web3 section of your company, I would be concerned if my CTO did not have expertise in that field, unless I was like becoming the CTO. So if you're asking like whether or not you should like hire somebody else to like handle that entire process, that's also kind of iffy. I've seen issues with hiring external resources that are not like embedded in your company because it's maybe they have a really deep knowledge of crypto, but then they don't have the expertise of your company necessarily to understand how to marriage the two. So I don't. My recommendation would be, hey, CTO, go read lots of stuff about crypto. But do hire someone who knows something about it, has industry experience, but don't expect them to own all of the work. It is a collaborative process. Companies in general should be collaborative. That's my advice as a individual contributor. I guess I did say I owned a beverage company, but that's like CPG, so it's completely unrelated to like having a CTO.
CTO, the technology behind the soda.
Yeah. Good question. I mean, like, good luck to you. That's really exciting.
Oh, I love to hear healthcare. I think it's a great use case. Very good use case. Lots of great ideas around what blockchain can do in the healthcare sector. I'd also say, like, hopefully the CTO has like a mentor and definitely like can gravitate towards a blockchain, advisor, if you will. someone that can kind of like walk alongside them and to guide and to help develop, and somebody who obviously is technical too would be even more advantageous. Because I have an advisor. There's a lot of benefits from having somebody that doesn't work in your company but is an external that is just there to like you to ask questions and whatnot, and it's always nice to have. But yeah, good luck to you, Mr. Healthcare Company, Mrs. Healthcare Company. Either way, exciting.
Okay, Tom says thank you. We've got another question from Marta. She says, do you work remotely at Consensys?
Yes.
Do you? Do you? Are you at home right now, Emily?
I am at home. Do you see
my
curtains?
bedroom? Yes, we are
Yes.
very much remote, indefinitely. We've been remote since the inception, I believe. So
yeah, we were remote first before it was cool. I mean, if you are interested in like office life, it exists. Consensys does have offices. That's actually part of the reason. So you guys don't know, I'm based in SF right now. I am moving to New York in a month. Part of that was because Consensys does have an office in New York. And so like I personally wanted more of that hybrid environment. But again, you have like the flexibility to do whatever. Yeah. I am not a digital nomad. I'm like a digital nomad adjacent person. So I'd probably spend like 2 years in New York and then like 2 years in Singapore and 2 years in whatever, you know what I mean? So like there's a lot of flexibility. Half of my team works in Australia, New Zealand.
And we're all over the map, aren't we?
Yeah. I don't know. Where are you, Scott?
I'm in Seattle, Washington, and
okay.
I stay put, but we do like WeWorks is available if you do want to get that office collaborative environment. I hate traffic to Seattle. It's absolutely horrendous, and California is no different. So I really much enjoy the cost savings of no gas and staying in my home to do it. But yeah, so we've been remote, and the autonomy is great too. I mean, it's not your 9 to 5 job. You work around hours that work for you, and we're okay with that. And we encourage that actually, because that's allows you to thrive better. You're not boxed in, and you're not big brothered. So I love that.
Yeah, it's really flexible because we also have unlimited PTO. Right. So I just like, I don't even think about it. I'm like, I'm tired today. I'm gonna take
today off.
yeah. So
yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Another question directed at Scott from Yagoda. He says, how does the employment ratio look like at Consensys right now? Which roles are dominated by which gender?
So a DEI question. That is a very good question. I think it's a huge emphasis by Consensys. We are putting a lot of effort and focus on making a very cohesive, balanced looking company. So what we want to do is we want to basically say, hey, if you don't work at Consensys, and if Consensys is a big building, we want you to be able to look through the windows and see a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multifaceted group of people with various differences, and we all are united at the same front. And so part of that comes with diversifying and embracing diversity for what it is. And so one of the efforts we have been doing is we will partner with like Crypto Chicks, for example, is a great partner of ours that have provided us a lot of great, female candidates. And that's one of the efforts in which we would like to see not only more of that gender into our company, but like at a leadership level. Love to see senior level folks in a technical spectrum, even better. So we definitely are continually to like look outside of other ecosystems that have great communities like Crypto Chicks that we can contribute and help and evolve and educate. And hopefully after like a session like this, y'all would be encouraged to come in and pursue opportunities with Consensys. The roles itself, I mean, they're very like split. I think both technical and non-technical are kind of a balance in terms of what we are looking for. And then, when we get back to the, scaling mode of hiring, we will certainly have a mix of your developer type positions, as well as sales and even people in talent, HR, et cetera. And so those are definitely, we want to kind of elevate both, but I don't have numbers on the gender ratio, but it is something that we are heads down. Although, I mean, obviously, Emily, you can speak to that too, being, coming on board.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just want to note, like, I think the piece about females or like women in leadership is such a big point. It's one thing to have ratios, but like it's another to have like people in power. I do want to say that the lead engineer for our layer 2 team at Truffle is Faina Schultz. So she is like my girl boss hero.
She's
She's
amazing.
so intelligent. Like every week she puts out a layer 2 like what's happening thread on Twitter that actually gets used at layer 2 companies to help inform their employees about like, what's the latest happening. So I that's super cool. Like there are role models out there. Like I guess I'm a woman there. I think it really, the thing about diversity or like inclusive teams in a Web3 company is like a really difficult problem to solve. Because it's like one part like tech is already just like an imbalanced industry. Like Web3 crypto specifically, like it gets even more imbalanced, right? And so like how do you figure out like changing that and overcoming the ratio issue within the industry itself, right? And it's really great that we have organizations like Crypto Chicks, HerDAO, SheFi. It I think the thing that I found most kind of empowering coming into Web3, like I said, I had come from like a traditional DevOps engineer background. I have felt like way more connected to the women and felt like there were such like a stronger presence in Web3 versus Web2, even though there are fewer for sure. And I think that's just coupled with like you have people who are naturally passionate about it, and I think that feeds into a funnel of like everybody sees problems and they want to go and fix it. And so that's something that's happening internally within Consensys. It's happening like at the grander scale of Web3 in general. And so I have never felt like alienated as a woman. Like I've definitely been to like conferences where I am like the only girl or like one of very few. And that's an issue, but that is a problem being thoroughly solved. I think, did Crypto Chicks help sponsor like F3 VC? I'm not entirely sure. I thought I met someone there, but like I like there are all women hackathons that are happening. I like HerDAO is having a hackathon at ETH Lisbon. Like when I talked about F3VC, there was a all women's conference in Vancouver called Festival that I loved. It was